Good morning, everybody. I remember almost 40 years ago when I met Kathy. I remember the door she walked through when I first saw her. I remember what she was wearing, the fur on the collars of her coat. I remember where she went to sit down. I also remember choosing quickly to go and introduce myself to her and welcome her. Subsequent to that, we became friends. We eventually married. We made a family together. And 40 years later, I can honestly say, from that day 40 years ago to today, has been a life that I could not have imagined living had I not met Kathy. A whole new world opened up to me. Maybe that's a little bit like what's happening here in Revelation 21. From the first 20 chapters of Revelation might be the whole history of humanity, battles and wars, and we come to chapter 21 and a whole new world opens up. We see the end game toward which everything in the previous 20 chapters, everything in this world has been ultimately pointing. And the way the revelation to John from Jesus is described, a new heaven and a new earth come together. No longer any sea. Sea, I think there will be seas and lakes and things like that in the new creation. But here, sea is a symbol of danger and distress and problems, and those things will be gone. And a bride coming down like a holy city. As you can see, these are all symbols. And we think of a city as maybe a decadent place. No, this city, the New Jerusalem, is pure and comes to earth, and we see God coming to earth to dwell with his people. And we will be his people, and God himself will be with us and be our God. It's like husband carrying his wife over the threshold into their new home, and they dwell together. They make a life together. That is the future of believers, your future. No more crying, no more pain, tears, death. All of that has passed away. And then in verse 5, I am making all things new, says Jesus. I am not making new things. I am taking all the things that exist, renewing them, making them new, restoring them, redeeming them. God throws nothing out. All things are redeemed, restored. And at the center is God. He says, it's done. I'm the Alpha and the Omega. Write these things down, count on them. In other words, organize and approach your current life in such a way that your life now is shaped by what life will be like in the consummation, in the new creation. And then Jesus says, if you're thirsty, come. I will give you the water from the spring, to the water of life to drink. And I think it's true. There's not a single one of us who's not thirsty. Every one of us knows the feeling of that this life should be more than it is, that there's more out there than that I'm missing something. And that's because you were built for something more. Therefore, in this world, live in the tension between what is and the best that can come about, and the reality that the best that can come about for you now doesn't fulfill. And let that feeling, yearning for something more, the German word Sehnsucht, longing, yearning. Let that point you to God. Live in that tension. Let it wake us up out of the same old, same old. The Chronicles of Narnia is this great book, series of 7 books, children's story, but really written for adults, where Susan, Edmund, Lucy, and Peter enter into Narnia and they meet Aslan, the lion, the Christ figure, and they go through all of these journeys up until the final battle, which is the last book, book 7, which is the book of Revelation in C.S. Lewis's telling, and we come to the end. And here's how it reads. And as Aslan spoke, he no longer looked to them like a lion, but the things that began to happen after that were so great and so beautiful that I cannot write them. And for us, the readers of these stories, we can most truly say that they all lived happily ever after. But for them, and we can say this is for us because we're in the story, but for them it was only the beginning of the real story, and their life in this world and all their adventures in Narnia had been only the cover and the title page. Now at last, they were beginning chapter 1 of the great story, which no one on earth has read, which goes on forever and ever, in which every chapter is better than the one before. That's captures what we are capturing here, what Revelation 21 is telling us. You know what? I think I can prove to you that this is a true story. Go to any movie theater and watch any movie, and you will see that those movies, oh, it could be Lord of the Rings, or it could be Superman, or the fairy tale Cinderella, or Gone with the Wind, any of them. And it begins with a once upon a time, and things were okay, and then comes a villain or a problem, or someone steals a lover, or a bomb goes off, and then there's part 3, where there's the long journey, where there's a battle that has to be fought. And then comes part 4, where a hero comes in and rescues, and it's sort of like a happily ever after. And all stories are either that or a building on that. And so, when you see those stories, some people will say, oh, this story is just another one of those fairy stories, just another one of those myths or fairy tales. But no, because you know deep down in your heart that you are made for something more. You know that this is the true story, and all the others are build-ups to it, pointers, shadows of the real thing. And so, let's go on. Act 4 is described further here. Yes, the holy city comes down from heaven, and it's brilliant, and there are 12 gates representing the 12 tribes of Israel, and there are 12 foundations representing the 12 apostles. And then we see a golden measuring rod, and heaven is described as a perfect cube, 1,500 miles deep, 1,500 miles wide, 1,500 miles high. And you might think that's not big by our standards, but by their standards, that was like imagining the distance from here to the sun, immense and perfect. And these are not literal. We can't take this literally, of course. This is the best the human language can do. And the foundations of the city, made of precious stones, jasper and sapphire and emerald and ruby and turquoise and amethyst. And these were the jewels that were on the breastplate of the priest in Exodus. And when the light goes through these jewels, it refracts into so many brilliant colors. The picture is of brilliant beauty that is beyond description. That is the new creation for which you and I are destined. And then it tells us in verse 22, no temple. How can there be no temple? For a Jew, there has to be a temple. It's magnificent, it's beautiful, it's the dwelling of God, but there's no temple. Here in Salzburg, there is a church called St. Sebastian. In front of St. Sebastian is this huge scaffolding. We have never seen the front of St. Sebastian. All we've seen is the scaffolding. Imagine, what if the builders made the scaffolding so beautiful, so radiant, covered with gold plate and white, like a Renaissance, magnificent Renaissance church. And people came from all around, all over the world to look at the scaffolding. Tour groups would come by and describe it. But then the builder comes along and starts to take down the scaffolding. And people complain, don't take it down, that's part of our city. But the builder and the church leaders say, it was only the scaffolding. It's what was going on behind it. The renewal of that which was behind it is what it was meant for. And that's what's happening here. The temple's gone, but what it was meant to hold is being revealed. That is God Himself. The Lamb and God Almighty are the temple. And the light comes from God Himself. And the Lamb is the lamp. And the gates to this great reality, this is the picture, word picture, of this new creation, which will be almost like the world we live in now, but will be so cleansed and so magnificent. The gates to it are never closed. Do you know what that means? That means anybody is welcome to come in. Anyone who can stand the glory of God, come on in. Unfortunately, that does mean that there are people who refuse God. There are people for whom the glory of God is so painful, they are repelled, and they make a self choice to not enter. But God is saying to anyone, come on in. If you're thirsty, I've got what you need. It's not out there. And so, this is the final picture of the consummation of all things. And there are two takeaways that I want to leave you with. First, this is a reality that cannot not happen. As I said, everything on planet Earth has ultimately been pointing to that. So just like a runner knows what the goal line is and what it's like to cross the goal line, and that goal line shapes everything he does in the race, may this end game shape our lives today. Or just like a soccer team is preparing for the season opener, and in all of its practices, they are geared around playing in the season opener. We are getting ready for the game, the season opener, the real life that is after this one. This is the Shadowlands. That's going to be the real world where the sun shines brightly. Secondly, and this is huge, for 35 years, my family and I went to my Aunt Tilly's in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania for Thanksgiving dinner. And we would park on North Beatty Street, and we would get out of the car and walk into Aunt Tilly's home, and we would enter the living room, and the moment we opened the door, we could smell the aroma of the turkey and the stuffing and the gravy wafting out of the kitchen. And when we sat down, it was almost a torturous delight. We couldn't wait. It was a pain. It was almost torture. But it was like an aromatic appetizer. It wasn't the real thing, and it was inviting us to the real thing, which was in the dining room with the real cranberries and turkey and stuffing. Everything, the best things in your life, that wedding day, which couldn't be any better, that it was only an appetizer. The magnificence and joy of that day, it was only an appetizer, pointing to the final consummation, the final completion of it. Remember the birth of your child, the love you felt that you never felt before. That love was only an appetizer for the love that you would feel for others in the new world that's coming, or the acceptance letter to a job or college. You got it. You were accepted. Wow, I was accepted. Oh, only a foretaste, an appetizer for how you will feel loved and accepted when that final day comes, when you enter God's final kingdom, or the evening that you have with friends that is so good that it can't get any better and you don't want it to end. That fellowship is only what? The appetizer of that final sense of community and fellowship that will exist in the new creation. Kathy and I took a cable car up to the Schafberg mountain here in Salzburg, and we sat at a table. Magnificent day, cool breeze, looking over the valley below, snow-capped mountains in the distance, and we sat and ate the great appetizer of all times, Kaiserschmarrn. And it's like chopped up pancakes that Kaiser Joseph ate, and with pureed plums on it. Oh, a magnificent day that still stays in my mind. It was only an appetizer of the great things to come, or for me, nothing gets better than seeing my family together. All of us in the same place, interacting. It's only what? Say it with me, an appetizer. But I would be remiss if I didn't add this. Do you remember maybe a time when the pain you were experiencing was so deep and it was so inconsolable? And at that moment, somebody said the right word, or touched your shoulder in the right way, or gave you a hug that gave you a feeling for a brief moment that all is well. Made no sense, but you felt it. Again, that was an appetizer, a pointer. Being able to say, there's more to come. And so, I think of that great song, It Is Well With My Soul, and here's its last verse. And if you ever sing it and tears well up in your eyes, I know why they well up, because that story that we find ourselves in has this ending. And Lord, haste the day when my faith shall be sight, the clouds be rolled back as a scroll, the trump shall resound, and the Lord shall descend. Even so, it is well with my soul. Why? Because this story is true. It's all true. It's all true. God bless you all. May this ending of the great story shape your life today and forevermore. God bless you all. Have a great week and month and thereafter. Bye-bye.